So, in the opening of our movie, we had the satanic ritual, which on its own portrays and hints at the outcasts of society. Through everything from location, costume, the use of unnatural camera shots, and editing choices. The location we chose for this was a bathroom, which stereotypically where the victim of bullying may go hide. Ellie's costume and makeup of all black is to be associated with depression and darkness in a person, which amplifies the significance of this ritual. The editing, such as the overlaid shots of the hands, which was inspired by the montage editing of the movie Seven, has this shaking effect, which gives the audience the sense of something that's not quite right and the sense of mental instability. And it's something that we wanted to hint at. The ending of the sequence shows Ellie killing herself, and there is a close-up of her face which slowly fades into the face of the killer, hinting at some kind of metamorphosis into this supernatural force. With the mental illness side, I think we were very suggestive in the way we framed our shots and portrayed the subject of self-harm and suicide. This montage style of editing, which was inspired dominantly from Zombieland and Seven and many others, where scenes jump and blur into one another, showing this kind of in and out consciousness that the character has and may not truly realise what their actions are going to be doing. A few of the shots we have is where the blood drips from Ellie's hand, and we have a close-up of the sink below where it's slowly dripping and draining into. This is heavily inspired from the drops of blood that I had seen from American Psycho, and it really shows this contrast of the white sink against the red blood, showing some kind of violence and anger. In this sequence, we use a type of effect with the audio voiceover that Ellie has done for us, where we have her original voiceover, and then underneath that we have a slightly distorted and demonic version set to a slight delay. So as the scene progresses, that distorted version of the voice slowly gets louder and louder and louder, and eventually catches up almost to Ellie's voice, almost as if she's being chased or followed. The imagery from this sequence is very contradicting. As you can see, I wanted to have this white clean background that a bathroom sort of has, and on top of that it just shows all the red blood, and even with the shot of the mirror you can see how Ellie's face and the mirror itself is just covered with the blood, showing this big contrast between red and white, and that kind of purity of white being exposed and tainted with the blood of an innocent girl. So commonly, a lot of conventions of horror can involve blood and this kind of juxtaposition of light and dark. And in the first sequence itself, we see this specifically self-harm, blood, isolation. There's a lot of just stereotypical big blockbuster horror conventions being used in the first montage to just set up the atmosphere for the rest of the sequence. So after this ritual sequence, we go into these long shots panning down through a corridor, and they jump between one another as this rattling noise gets louder and louder. So the atmosphere already is being set with the darkness and the way the shadows are playing with each other and the lights. The pace of editing of the sequence, the very short sequence after the metamorphosis, is very unique in a way that it starts off slow and then exponentially increases in speed, almost as if the impatience of these teenagers just are getting to them, and that's the moment that the door opens and we see that, and there is a supernatural force kind of hinted at here, as before they weren't able to open the door, they had to rattle it, and then the moment occurred. after all the tension built up. As we move further through the sequence, we see the teenagers running down the corridors and running up the stairs. Eventually, they stop, and there's a very dramatic close-up on Shivani's face, where the light underneath her is creating shadows on her face, once again creating this opposition of like darkness and light. And it's a classic, like, stereotypical, like, ghost story angle for a light to be at. And from here we hear her talking, and it cuts to a POV shot with a red filter over it, signifying the killer and the supernatural force watching them, and playing on that common convention of being observed and being watched. It's that natural primal fear that taps into us being alone in a dark place with something watching us. This specific shot with the observation, in editing we had to apply a filter over it to add that red kind of tint to it, almost like you're looking through the eyes of the killer and you see the anger and the hatred and the violence associated with this, which is contrasts to the shots that you would see normally in this sequence, where there isn't really much of a filter over it and it's just normal colours. After this, we start to follow one single character, and we watch them slowly walk down this long corridor with their breathing amplified, and we can clearly get a feeling for how like anxious and how kind of tense this sort of situation is, walking around this abandoned school at night. The darkness playing on the light once again here, classic convention that we used. The theme of isolation here is once again key, as the group is split up and we're following one main character, and the angle that we were given initially kind of is off-putting, almost as if there's something bad to come, and obviously we know that the killer does eventually come down and find him. We start following the character from behind, but then shortly after we switch and start tracking from the front as he walks down the corridor, and the only really visible thing is his face. The character then stops, hearing a sudden noise, and the camera zooms in on this painting that had fallen. Once again, there's this white background of the red eye that we just focus on deeply, and that fades to another POV shot of the killer. Again, like the previous POV shot from the killer, it's that voyeuristic like fear that you're being watched that we've used here. After this POV shot, I actually decided to use a mixture of both the handheld and the frame shots, developing that sort of Blair Witch style of the film, and this allows for the audience member to feel very involved and very like close to the breathing and like the fear that the character is feeling at this time. The section here where it cuts between the handheld and the frame shots on the floor is very like atmospheric, as the killer's supernatural side starts to come out. You see him walking barefoot, but it speeds up really quickly, and that shows that there's something not quite normal about this that adds to the supernatural presence in this film, especially with the sound effects that we've added over this, which was in fact bug noises, like bugs crawling, which we had heightened and made louder. As this like final part of this clip plays out, the music in the background starts to build and build and build, and so do the noises, that non-diegetic noises around, such as the bug noises referred to earlier, and the Jason Voorhees. And we also use like heartbeat here and The satanic ritual we used again, just to add that context back to it. And using classic horror conventions, the main character here falls over and is stumbling for his life. And at that moment, when the audience is building that tension, the jump scare for the final scene at the end of the 2 minutes.